A great thing to be gathered again. And just before we get going with all the talking, it's always a good idea to have something extremely rousing on the musical front. And the gal who always starts that off for us is here again tonight. A big welcome, please, for Amanda Brown.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to start off with a wee funny one for you, okay? And this is like me coming out of kind of retirement after like 18 months as well. The pandemic has been a crazy affair, but it's lovely to see everybody back outside. It really is. So I hope you enjoy this. Land of the purple heather, land of the dirty weather, land where the midges gather, Scotland the brave, land that is full of fannies, Andy Murray and Saturday sunnies, land where we sell our grannies. I'd never do that. Scotland the brave. Used to say on Father's Day you could hear the bagpipes play, but all you hear is the eagle tones of Elton John and the Rolling Stones. Land that is full of stinkers, buckfast monks and BP drinkers, whiskey puts a lot of stinkers into Scottish graves. That is full of skivers, comic singers, deep sea divers, turbans on our buskin drivers, Scotland the brave, land of the brutal bobby, councillors with part-time jobbies, architects with pay and hobbies, Scotland the brave. Flats and council levies, land of the Arctic lorries, Andy Stewart and the Corries, land where everybody bodies, Scotland the brave, land of the kilt and sporran, underneath there's nothing warren, how we wish the wind was warm, Scotland the brave. You must admit it's pretty gruesome walking about with a frozen twosome. So you've got, you mustn't lose 'em, Scotland the brave. 'Cause every test tried to assure us Labour doesn't need to endure us. BBC curbs our enjoyment, government makes unemployment. Never mind, the day is near, we're independent, so we'll be here. Raise a glass to all not here, Scotland the brave. You raise a glass to all not here, Scotland the brave. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to do a wee traditional one for you. I said I was just going to work on just how I felt the night. Because I've had news. Now, I'm going to stop playing just now. If any of you know me, you'll know that I've come on a journey and a half in the last, 7 years. And I've grown up into such a normal human being. And you're going to read some stuff about me. And that was from a time where, I can't even explain to you. God, you all know I went missing. For goodness sake. I used to like a whiskey. But now I like to run, and I like to try and be the best human being that I can ever be. So I apologise to anybody that I offended years ago by singing songs that maybe weren't relative to anything that really meant anything to me, but that's the way it is. And in between times, this is where my soul is, and it always has been, and you all know that, so here you go. Oh, fluty Scotland, when will we see your legs again? That fought and died for, they beat hill and glen and stood against them. Proud Edward's army and sent them homewards to think again. Those hills are bare now, and autumn leaves lie thick and still. A land that was lost now, that we so dearly held and stood against them. Proud Edward's army and sent them homewards to think again. Those days have passed now, and in the past they must remain. But we will still rise now and be a nation again, and stood against them. Proud Edward's army and sent them homewards to think again, to think again, to think again. Thank you. Okay, so I love this song. I sing this to all the old people at my old folks' home, and they love it. Anyway, it makes me all giddy and stuff. So here you go, and I'm going to make it all moody. Thank you. Come on, the old lassie, where have you been? Say drowsy and sleepy, I can see by your een. In all the wide world, you ne'er find a friend like the lads that were raised amongst heather. Hey, away your silks, your satins, your shawls, your pelties and soirees, and your elegant bars, but a dance in the barn is worth 10 in the horse with the lads that were raised amongst heather. Now poets say plenty to this present day that can sing just as sweet as the birdies in May. There's some made them did, but I'm proud fair to say they were lads that were raised amongst heather. Hey, away your silks, your satins, your shawls, your pelties and soirees, and your elegant bars, but a dance in the barn is worth 10 in the horse with the lads that were raised amongst heather. Take a walk through your cities, grand buildings outside, and stare at the grandeur we speak with pride. Fine ships they were built on the banks of the Clyde by the lads that were raised amongst heather. Hey, away your silks, your satins, your shawls, your pepties and soirees, and your elegant bars. But a dance in the barn is worth 10 in the hearts by the lads that were raised amongst heather. Now England can boast of the sweet scented rose, and Ireland is prudy the shamrock she holds. But give me the land where the clear water flows and the mountains are covered in heather. Away your silks, your satins, your shawls, your pepties and soirees, and your elegant bars. But a dance in the barn is worth 10 in the hearts with the lads that were raised amongst heather. With the lads that were raised amongst heather. Thank you. Thank you very much. 2 seconds. Okay, this one, just no words. Scots way, while Wallace bled, Scots one Bruce has oft times led. Welcome to your gory bed, or to victory. Now's the day and now's the hour. See the front of battle hour. See approach proud Edward's power. Chains and slavery. What could be a traitor name? What could fill a coward's grave? What's it beast to be a slave? Let him turn and flee. What for Scotland's king alone? Freedom's sword will strongly draw. Free man stand and free man fall. Let him follow me. By oppression's woes and pains, by your sons in servile chains, we will train our dearest pains, but we shall be free. Lay the proud and suppers low, tyrants fall with every blow, liberty with every foe. Let us do our deed. Scots way, Wallace bled. Scots one Bruce with all times led. Welcome to your gory bed, or to victory.
Marvellous. That's so rousing. It's funny, isn't it? It's so long since we've been sort of just joining in the things that should have become habitual for us in all these years. So it's lovely to hear that sung with Smedham. Amanda Brown, please. So anyway, as the panel assembles behind me, seamlessly I hope, just say that tonight is, although it's a sort of weird event, and obviously the pandemic has closed everything down so much, and I actually salute all of you who've had the courage to come tonight, because I know a lot of folk will have been swithering, and I've seen how many other events have got far fewer people than you would normally expect, because it just feels a bit edgy still. But it's a classic yes night, because it's founded on the things that yes thrives on, the currency of yes, the energy of yes. And that is friendship, albeit with a slight arm up your back, which is why all of us are here. It's also why all the musicians are here as volunteers. It's also why Kevin Gibney is here from Indie Live. And we should first wave to everybody who's watching online, and then give a massive round of applause for a guy who came from Glasgow and he's no offie wheel. Please. But if there is one characteristic, really, of yes, it's doggedness. It's doggedness. We're still yes. And nothing's changing that. I can see and I ken that the way many grown-up commentators look at us is as if we're teenagers, going through a wee phase. We're going to come out of it soon. No. This is not a phase. This is having looked at our own country, at our own lives, at our own expectations, at everything we thought was kind of normal in this country, the best you could hope for, and realizing it was never enough. And it has to change, and that knowledge cannot be unknown, and what we've seen cannot be unseen. We've changed. We're here. We're dogged, and we're not going back. And if there's one person who represents that quality of doggedness, it's the man who's sitting in the corner, hot foot from the Royal Infirmary for about the 5th time in a month, Mike Blackshaw. Now, I should just say, just when I'm getting back to Indie Live, who are my blimmin' heroes in life, actually, as a radio broadcaster in days of yore. These guys are the new kind of broadcasting. They are citizen broadcasters who care. And you couldn't actually have a better set of people to be connecting us all to events. And so for everyone who's watching, it would be tremendous if you did contribute, you naughty little minxes. You could contribute to independencelive.net. There's a click button there. You could make a contribution at the end of this tonight, and everyone would be awfully pleased. Now, one other thought in all of this, just a little thing about that, like take Indie Live. Where's No Live? Where's Union Live Radio? Where is all the things that we have got quite, well, okay, stop now. But the point is that the activists, the self-starters, the people who don't expect to be paid, the people who are doing this for love, the people who are learning as they go, the people who are managing to master techniques that I know because I was in that world, normally demand a whole squad of people. There's one guy sitting up the back. That kind of thing is not replicated on the other side of this argument. And so that kind of level of doggedness and persistence is characteristic of this campaign. It reminds me of one inevitably I was involved with on the island of Egg. If anyone had told the Eggachs and supporters at the very start that it would take 8 years to achieve the buyout, I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't have even started. I'm sure even more people would be astonished that in the end they'd win. But the two things come together. The long perseverance through extraordinary obstacles that some people don't know the half of. You probably don't even know Pavarotti tried to buy Egg. Aye. So there were extraordinary obstacles, and it became slightly ridiculous, but there was a point where, as Alistair McIntosh put it, egg became unlayerdable. Well, Scotland's at that point. We're not being run with somebody, we're not puppets. We're not kind of just toddling along as usual. We're not going to have this ridiculous, undemocratic state of affairs. How we get over the next bit, yeah, it's difficult, but we're dogged and we're not going away. This is not a phase. We're still yes. So, thank you for coming tonight. And I should say just a little bit about the evening that lies ahead. We started off with marvellous music from Amanda Brown. There'll be more music later on from Andrew Gordon and Euan Johnston. After the interval at 8:30, in case you're trying to gauge your need for breaks, the second half, we have an interval at 8:30, and the second half will start off with new political satire from a mystery toff. We're aiming to be out of here at about 10 o'clock, chucking all our spare coins and notes, if we're feeling that way inclined, into the buckets as you go for the Yes Hub. So, just to say, this is kind of like question time and not like question time. There are sadly no audience microphones, some of the COVID problems and other things. There are therefore also no audience plants. I think you're all fairly genuinely here on your own kind of commission, which is pretty groovy, really, yeah. There's no Fiona Bruce, there's no auto cue, and there's no panelists who don't believe in independence. Still, look at them. Debate will be frisky. There's questions that have been submitted, mostly from national readers. There's a few more being fed in. There are, I think, some journalists in the house, so be nice to them. They're doing a job, and panelists might want to bear that in mind. Some panel members, obviously, are colourful characters, but they've been brave enough to volunteer to come here and answer questions most politicians duck. So, nae heckling, please. And without further ado, let me introduce your sparky panel. Right. Where is he? Commonweal's Robin McAlpine, who set up Commonweal think tank in 2014, was director till earlier this year when he asked to step down and became head of strategic development after a critical article about Nicola Sturgeon. Sufficiently controversial for another Robin McAlpine altogether to have his Twitter description read, "Expat, not Scotnat, not the Robin McAlpine you're looking for." So that guy's life has obviously been made a misery. But we have the Robin McAlpine we're looking for. Thanks for coming, Robin. We have, on the extreme left, and sadly probably a little bit obscured by me, I might try and shimmy out of the road in a minute, the SSP's Colin Fox, who was the founding member and is national co-spokesperson of the Scottish Socialists. He was MSP for the Lothians in that Rainbow Parliament in 2003 that had 6 seats, including one Tommy Sheridan. He was a member of the Yes Scotland Advisory Board. Not only did he somersault round Meadowbank memorably after winning, but he also refused to swear an oath of allegiance to the Queen and was ejected from Holyrood's swearing-in ceremony for singing "A Man's a Man for All That" instead. So, the SNP's Michelle Thomson, Scottish businesswoman, former MP, now MSP for Falkirk East. She gets around. She started off as a professional musician. She was then postgraduate diploma and did 23 years in financial services. I guess somebody's got to do it, for Standard Life and the Royal Bank. So she can count. Let's look at it this way. So she set up a business with Roger Mullen, Momentous Change, to help companies manage change, which has got her into less hot water than a small property business she set up decades back, bygones. We have over here the Scottish Greens' Jillian Mackay, who is the first Scottish Green to be elected in central Scotland. Gillian grew up in the shadow of Scotland's biggest polluter, Ineos, at Grangemouth. Perhaps that set her on the journey that took her to a degree in marine biotechnology and biodiversity. She started off in politics, a Green intern, through a programme to support disabled people into politics. And although you will absolutely not realise this about Gillian, she has a condition that can cause disturbance like tinnitus or vertigo, and she finds it sometimes quite hard to hear, so she is lip reading people a lot. See if you think you're having a private conversation in the front row. It'll be as private as some of the private conversations in Holyrood that Gillian's earwigging the whole time. So, delighted that Gillian is here. She's also the party's spokesperson on health and social care. So, we also have Bella Caledonia's editor, Mike Small, who's sitting over there, freelance journalist, author, publisher. He's also a member of the Enough Collective, and I think he's working on both at the same time, a biography of Patrick Geddes and a history of Scotland from 1950 to the present day. Really? At the same time? My God, right. Okay, and finally, we have Selma Rehman, who's founding member of Edinburgh Women for Independence, a board member of WIFI, and also a member of the Scottish Independence Convention Board, a frequent contributor to the National Letters page, and a blogger who chose this quote for her blogging site by Thomas Muir. We have achieved a great duty in these critical times. We have been the first to revive the spirit of our country and give it a national existence. That was said in 1798, seems pretty blooming appropriate to me now. Your panel. Righty. Well, you'll be thinking, for goodness sake, women, ask a question. So we're getting there, right? I've looked and tried and clumped the questions. So the first half is about strategy for IndyRef 2, getting to IndyRef 2. The second half, after the break, will be the big, difficult questions. So it's just so we don't kind of repeat ourselves, and I think everybody knows that. So let's start off, if we may, with Michelle. Why have the big independence, pro-independence majorities that we saw during the COVID period, why have they seemingly disappeared?
I'm not sure what that's got to do with strategy to independence. You mean in terms of voting and the poll the other day?
Yeah, well, there's been, just by the way, I'm asking all the tough questions here, right? So
that was an in with the heavy brogues.
Okay, 7 out of 8 polls since May have shown a lead for no. And clearly that contrasts somewhat with last year. So I'm just asking folk, why do we think that that's turned around?
The honest answer is, I don't know. But I do think, I'm so heartened to be here this evening, because one thing I've been saying to people consistently, and it's fair to recognise and acknowledge here that there's been quite a bit of argy-bargy in our wider movement, where we've allowed our disagreements to overshadow our agreements, and we have been energetically and sometimes over-enthusiastically agreeing with each other on social media. And while we're not doing that, we're not engaging with the people that really matter. It's so heartening to be here this evening, because one thing I will consistently say through the course of it is, if you do anything for every 5 minutes you spend agreeing with somebody, spend double that time working and engaging with somebody that you don't agree with. I think the post-COVID landscape is incredibly complex, because although you say that, you probably need to segment it down. How are people thinking and feeling? So, for example, Brexit has caused a huge shunt for certain types of people. So I think the picture is more complex than that. But I would genuinely say I don't think that there has been enough engagement and reaching out to people, which in fairness, in the midst of a pandemic, has been a bit difficult to do. But we need to start that now. Okay, Mike Small?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things. I think people are scared. I think people are tired. I think people are exhausted. I think we're living through completely unprecedented times. And whilst I think it was right that we didn't campaign during the pandemic, because I think that would have been wrong and would have been seen to be wrong, I do think that there's been a failure of leadership in that period. So I think whilst it's right not to campaign, I think that the Scottish Government and the SNP could have been building the institutions and building momentum for change, and I think they failed to do that.
Okay, let's come to Colin. But I mean, the paradox is that those big majorities for independence were happening with no campaign for independence whatsoever.
Lesley, I think this is one of the three major questions the independence movement's got to address. Where is the majority? Where is the majority for independence? That's surely the principal question we've got to consider. So you asked there, why was support for independence 10% higher a year ago during the COVID pandemic? That was your question. And the answer is because at that time, people had a great deal more confidence in the way Nicola Sturgeon was handling the pandemic than Boris Johnson. And it was a reflection of that. It was also a reflection of the fact that Nicola Sturgeon, as the First Minister of the country, was given an hour every day on the state broadcaster in a press conference to make the case that she was making without any opposition. So those circumstances, those were the reasons for it. And frankly, I didn't think they were good at the time. I think the case for independence that we support, everyone in here, we have to keep making. We've been in the minority, I have to say to you. My feeling is since 2012, we've been in the minority. Those individual polls during the referendum period and more recently are flies in the wind. They're not sustained, they're not substantial, and I think the fundamental thing we need to discuss and consider is why are we behind in the polls, and if it is, as I believe, there's a weakness in our economic case, then we have to address that.
Okay. Tempting as it is to get wellied straight in on that, let's give everyone a shout first. Gillian.
So what I love about the Yes movement is that it's a movement of momentum, and I think the pandemic is has been a real stumbling block with that we haven't had the abilities to continue creating that movement and that movement forward, and not been able to have lovely events like this where we've all been able to come together and share ideas and create that passion and that buzz around it. The pandemic's definitely put a dampener on that. The situation we find ourselves in now is fundamentally different to 7 years ago, and Brexit has to be a factor in that. And I think Mike's right that fear is as we saw in the original referendum, fear is a hugely powerful tool. And I think a lot of people are quite frightened about their own economic situations, their own health, and various other things as well that have been brought to light as a result of Brexit, as a result of the pandemic, and all these things coming together, I think creates that level of uncertainty that people who may have been soft yes previously are seeing the problems that come with Brexit and thinking that Brexit and Scottish independence will cause the same things. And I think that's fundamentally not, I think that's for all of us a link we have to fundamentally break and show that actually this is a wonderful movement of hope and a wonderful movement that we should keep going to have that hope coming out of the pandemic, coming out of Brexit, and to move towards the next referendum.
Okay, I mean, obviously the Greens are in government now with the SNP. I mean, I know what you're going to both tell me, you kind of sort of speak out of turn, but is there a big master plan in there?
So obviously we're two separate parties, and that was the politician answer you were probably all waiting for. Our party council are consulting with the rest of the party, and from that really grassroots movement that we are, to come up with a Green Yes manifesto, a Green Yes plan for both how we deliver an independent Scotland, but also how we bring people with us, because that's something that the polls are showing that we need to do, and we do need to fundamentally bring people with us, change those soft yeses that have maybe gone no back to yes again, and make sure that it is a hopeful outlook for Scotland post-Brexit, post-pandemic, okay, and moving forward.
Right, Selma is shaking her head there. Can you wheek the microphone over?
Hi, thank you. I think that was a very brave statement that we've got to take the people with us, because I quite genuinely and very respectfully to the politicians on the table, that the politicians have forgotten about the people as far as the independence movement. And for me, that's being totally honest. Like everybody else, I sat on the couch, I watched the First Minister. If it hadn't been for the First Minister, God alone knows what would have happened. But it then became a case of where was everybody else, what were they telling us, what was happening, and there was not that connectivity. And the Yes movement has had to keep itself together. The Yes movement, call it what you will nowadays, has got to the stage whereby, if it wasn't for the Yes movement, where would you guys be at the moment? And that's my question. You would be sitting in a parliament that has lost its connectivity with the people as far as the Yes movement's concerned. Because yes, people are tired, they're exhausted, and they are definitely frightened post-Brexit. And where has been the leadership in relation to where we want to be, i.e. an independent nation again? And that leadership isn't coming from political parties, and we don't have necessarily a combined Yes movement with one leader. I'm not advocating that, but whatever is happening in the grassroots from the Yes movement is coming from us, and it's not coming from politicians.
I've asked to just come back on that. One thing that I would point out is that in this fantastic evening tonight, we all have a single aim. What that looks like in terms of the type of Scotland we want to be, we don't know. How we get there, we don't know, but we are all devout Yes supporters. But we have to remember that regrettably there are a great many of our fellow Scots who are not. And what we've got now in movement terms is, I describe myself as Yes cubed. So emphatically do I believe in it, and we have a great many people on the other side, which is why I said earlier, we could have a grand old time tonight violently agreeing, but how will that move the dial? And I suspect you're going to come on to that, but I would definitely remind people of that here, the voices in the middle, which is why it's so important that the collective voices of Yes gets back together, and again, I do agree with that.
Right, I'm sure Gordon Brown would be chuffed to think that his middle Scotland has managed to waft its way into this debate. But anyway, Robin, the question, where is the independence majority?
Okay, so we've just done published an analysis paper on this that Craig Dale did. So we tracked independence support right back to 2014. Now, one of my bugbears is that we've got only limited polling data and not very much qualitative research, so we know what's happening, we don't know why. So, once more my plea, more research, more knowledge, better idea what you're doing. What you infer from what you're seeing isn't negative exactly, and I'll really simplify this, but actually not many people are moving. Most people are staying where they were. There's more movement from either side into don't know than there is from one to the other. And what that does is, because it's usually reported with the don't knows removed, it makes the picture look like it's moving more, but there's more people that tend to move from one side or the other into don't know than jump over to the other side. And then if you look at the pattern over the long term, this is where it gets a little bit dispiriting, because if you track what's happening, it really does seem that we tend to rise and fall less by what we do and more by what shenanigans get up to at Westminster. So if you look at where the rises and falls, they don't really coincide with things you can identify in the independence movement. They tend to track to Brexit, but they fell away very quickly after Brexit. The shock of Brexit caused that. Or they track to Boris Johnson getting another term, or they track to, the omni-chaos of the COVID response down south. And I think my lesson from this was, there's not as much movement as it looks like. There's still a lot of people floating about in the middle, not sure. And what's largely happening is we're rising and falling according to events, rather than because we're specifically doing anything which is moving the voters around. So what we need to do is do a bit more work on what's causing some of the volatility. Again, we know some of this, but we don't know a lot of it. One last thing, and this is kind of a negative, and if you look at the kind of key question, why did it drop off so quickly? Because it really did drop quite startlingly this time. And again, this is another one of my bugbears. It does track to scrutiny during the election. So if you look at where it really started to tail off, it was during the election campaign earlier in the year. And I am very concerned that is because when we get the chance to be on a national stage and actually be talking about independence, the voice that the public is hearing is ducking the subject. So what they are hearing is, this is something that will happen in due course, I think was the terminology. And they're saying, yeah, no, but we were asking about the currency. Oh, no, that will happen in due course. So I think that the two big lessons are we really need to start to think about taking events into our own hands in terms of shifting votes rather than hoping that it will somehow just shift by osmosis. And secondly, we need to wake up to the fact that when we are getting screen time on independence, it's causing drops, not rises in support for independence. And I don't think that's a fundamental problem. I think that's to do with the way that we're responding to the questions we are being asked in the media and the way that feeds into people's perceptions of whether we're ready or not. So get ready, answer confidently, and come up with a coherent and consistent plan for not waiting for them to find us, but bringing them with us. And that's what we're not doing.
Okay, there's a lot of questions that kind of flow from that, but one immediate one that was being asked was, you know, the crystal ball moment. When will we have IndyRef 2? And just allied to that, you can choose which way you want to look at it. If Boris does go for an early general election in 2023, will that kibosh an IndyRef 2 that's left that late? So let's start this time with Colin.
Well, I think I have to be honest, I haven't come here to flannel anybody. I think it'll be a long time. I don't see there being a second referendum before 2023. Your question's in two parts, Lesley. When will we have IndyRef 2? Well, first of all, we all sit here and we know we can't have IndyRef 2 until Boris Johnson gives us permission. This is reserved to Westminster. There isn't any other route to achieving a legal binding referendum other than getting the bill passed at Westminster. And I've heard over the last few months, I'm sure my colleagues, everybody in this room has heard it been posited, that we'll go for some advisory referendum. And I have to say, that was catastrophic in Catalonia. I don't see Nicola Sturgeon repeating that. And neither do I see her, and this is a woman who I sat beside in the Justice Committee for 4 years, and we remember as a lawyer by training. I don't see Nicola Sturgeon going to the Court of Session and try to overturn the 1997 Scotland Act. That'll make money for lawyers who've made a fortune out of this movement one way or another in the last few times. It won't get you a second referendum. The question we have to consider and face, and we have to look down the barrel of a gun here, an ominous metaphor, I'm sure. How do we persuade Westminster to give us a second referendum when there are 600, and Michelle used to be on the benches, 600 MPs who are not going to give us that second referendum, not going to give you independence? So the answer to the question for me, as somebody who's a veteran of the anti-poll tax struggle, is you have to begin to consider an extra parliamentary struggle for independence. So while you're considering that, let me address the second question. Boris Johnson 2023, and to talk about him going for a general election. And of course the answer is, and I was talking to Mike about this earlier on, it's how does Boris Johnson keep getting away with these messes that he makes? How does he keep getting away with the stumbles in the UN? How does he get away with the stumbles he made last week and the week before? And of course the answer is, the opposition is garbage. The opposition is garbage. That's how he gets away with it. And Boris Johnson will call another election as soon as he thinks he can win it. And the way Keir Starmer leads the Labour Party, he probably will go for it in 2023. So that's a doubly depressing prospect on both counts for this movement. And I think we have to consider the consequences of looking at that very seriously. Boris Johnson has made it absolutely clear he's intransigent. You're not getting a second referendum. Come ahead if you're hard enough. And we have to be hard enough. And these two options about a Catalonia-style advisory referendum or going to the Court of Session are not the manifestations of a movement that's hard enough. We're looking for a kid's way out. We're looking for an easy option, rather than recognising that we have to make Boris Johnson an offer he can't refuse. And if that means extra parliamentary activity, that's what it means.
I don't know if anyone's fallen asleep yet, are you? No, right, okay. So, Selma, what do you reckon to that?
I worry that he will call one in 2023 because, exactly as Colin has said at the moment, what is happening in the rest of the UK? What are they on? What are they drinking? What's in the water down there that they accept this? And it's without a doubt the fact that there is no opposition. There is no calling within the rest of the United Kingdom to see any other way out of the problems that they've got. It's very difficult for people to openly say, oh, God, I really made a mistake when I voted for them, when you're talking about the red wall, whatever you're talking about. They're not going to admit that it's getting worse instead of getting better. And they're hanging in there thinking, well, you know, he wasn't that bad in London and it kind of worked all right. And I'm sure it's going to work out all right this time round. And that's what's actually happening. And that is so frightening because in the process, we're going down the pan. What is happening to the fish and the ag? What is happening to distribution at the moment? What is happening to the National Health Service? Everything like that is being hived off slowly. And I don't wish to sound not agrophobic, I don't wish to sound anti-English, but they're just not up to the task in England to provide an opposition. And that is what Scotland has to be. Scotland has to be the opposition to show that the rest of the United Kingdom is not working. And therefore, when it's not working for them, we've got to make it work for us. And our movement within Scotland is what's going to keep that going. The politicians down south won't keep it going, and the numerical imbalance in Westminster won't make it keep going. But 2023 is going to be a very dangerous time if he calls that general election. And quite honestly, there's nothing that's going to knock him off track, whereas 2023 is going to give him more time in the future. He might look a fool, but he's not that much of a fool.
Right, okay, thanks for that. Robin, I did notice when Colin was talking about the need for direct action, the advisory referendum idea, court action ain't going to cut it. Kids, you know, toys, I can't read my own writing without the glasses these days, but you all got the drift. Do you agree?
I mean, yes. I wrote a whole paper on the exact subject. This is the...
Robin, of course you've written a blooming paper on everything, right?
I did.
But you're here now, so give us
I did within our grasp, and I tried to really make the strong case that we got a gentleman's agreement when we thought we were going to lose. We're not going to get a gentleman's agreement now unless the difficulty of not making the agreement is bigger than making the agreement. We have to change the balance of pain on Westminster to make them believe they can't keep stonewalling us, because right now they can keep stonewalling us indefinitely. Don't lose votes out it. Their votes up here like them stonewalling us. Their votes down there either like it or don't care. We can't, you know, hope and appeal to their reason. Their reasoning is absolutely sound in this, and it is, don't talk to us, it doesn't do us any good here. The outcome of this is, I've got to say, in the week after Brexit, I wrote a piece which said there's next to zero chance of an independence referendum by 2018. And everybody in the team said, don't publish that, you'll depress everybody. But there wasn't. And the belief that we were possibly going to get it, I think wasted 2 years of the movement's time. And I've got to say, honestly, now my view is the chances of a referendum in 2023, they're not quite zero, but they're functionally there.
Okay, Robin, I'm sorry to jump in, but I've just looked at my watch.
Okay.
I'm determined to get one more question in this round. Michelle, everyone's given up. Well, not everyone. Well, everyone's spoken that so far has given up on the SNP actually having a referendum and even questioning whether that's the best approach.
Well, I wouldn't say everyone. I don't think the panel have given some views.
That's what I mean. Your colleagues so far.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't. You have to remember that the SNP is a very broad church, and for what it's worth, I continue to give personally everything I possibly can. My absolute focus is on everything that leads us as much as possible towards independence. And I'm not alone within the SNP, and I'm not alone within the Scottish Parliament. The very real problems, though, of how we get there, of which I have sympathy with a lot of the views expressed on the panel, I don't believe for a minute that Boris is going to give us a referendum. It's not in his interest to do so. Scotland is so asset-rich, he'd be a numpty to let us go. I have some sympathy with what Colin's saying and with what Robin's saying about the pain needs to be greater on the other side. And I also have a great deal of sympathy with the narrative and the messaging around this about asking for permission. We are the people and we decide, which is why, as well as the SNP, and I accept that responsibility in my own small part as a backbencher, but also the wider Yes movement, we have a great deal of organisation to do. There's a great deal of work, which we'll come on to in the second half, about what do we need in terms of some of these dodgy questions that we've got different answers to, currency, central bank and so on. There's a great deal of work to be done, because if there were to be an independence referendum tomorrow, as it stands at the moment, without those worked through answers, we would fail. So it's easy to say it's other people, it's over there. There's a great deal of work to be done, and we all play a part in that.
So can I just ask you then, do you think there will be a referendum by 2023?
I would incline to say no. And in that respect, I think that a general election, I think there will be one. I hear stories from Westminster that are already planning that, and guess what? The Tories are confident about winning. So there is a question then about what is the mandate for 2023. I think that's a genuine question.
And what should that be?
My own personal view is that I think that the SNP needs to up the ante on that mandate. What a vote for the SNP means. That's only one mechanism, though, of course. There's a great deal others that we need to deploy.
Okay, so just a matter of interest, should Nicola ask for a Section 30 and get knocked back before 2023 to clear that up?
No, I don't believe so. And the reason I don't believe so is that it goes back to the early ground setting in terms of we're coming out of a pandemic. A lot of people, and we can't forget that, a lot of people are hurting. A lot of people are on their financial hunkers and they need support. People have lost friends and so on. And there's going to be a period of time coming out of that. We've got a great deal of work to be done. I don't believe she should. At that point, I think we should be using the next general election to change, to shift the dial. And we've got a lot of work to do.
So as a de facto independence referendum?
No, I'm not suggesting that. I think we need to do more around what a vote for the SNP is.
Right, we'll have to try and prize the mystery out of you later, perhaps, but just let's have those who haven't spoken so far on this question. 2023, will we have an indie ref, and indeed, is that what we should be going for? Now, I've lost my order here. Who hasn't spoken? Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things. There's a declining benefit from them suppressing democracy. You know, we've talked about how the Yes movement needs to make the case and build the case, but so does the Unionists. And just saying, no, you can't have a vote, has been the single message put out from the Unionist campaign in the last 3 years. And there's a jeopardy of that, because, and I don't think I'm quite as certain as other speakers about them just saying no forever, because we know in the last 2 years there's been glimpses of advisors within the British government that have been saying, this, you can't do this forever. This is not an actual long-term strategy. So they are not united within their own government as that being the plan. So I think it's a bit more complicated, because if they just suppress the vote forever and ever, then when the referendum does come, they're going to lose it, because they haven't built their own case. And, you know, I mean, Boris Johnson is seen as this great success, but the supply chain in Britain is in the point of collapse. We're talking about a 3-day week. Prices, food prices are on the rise, as are energy prices. This is a complete perfect storm and a shambles that he's presiding over. So I think we should give a little less credence to the sort of bulletproof Boris idea.
Okay, and finally, Gillian.
So I very much agree with Mike there about that continued suppression of democracy. We're seeing it slightly at Holyrood at the moment with that continued creeping of legislating in devolved areas and things like that as well, which is a very deliberate and quite a sinister choice to continually make. And I think the rumblings about a general election in 2023, when the possibility of a referendum has been voiced, I think continually points to the fact that I think Boris Johnson's overall strategy at the moment is to suppress at all costs. But how long that can continue to hold out, I absolutely recognise that Colin's point on just a complete lack of opposition at Westminster.
What about Colin's other point, direct action?
I love a bit of direct action, but usually more climate related. But there's only so long that people can sit and be told no, and only so long that we can sit and ask politely before people feel that something more has to be done. I don't know how far we are away from that point at the moment, for all the reasons that Mike said about issues from Brexit, food shortages, gas prices going up, and all those sorts of things. It is a perfect storm for seeing direct action in some shape or form, and to get out from under that spectre of the UK collapse. And I think that's actually some of the strongest messaging around yes at the moment, is getting out from under the absolute disaster that is Boris Johnson and Westminster.
Right, okay, well look, that's all very interesting answers. I'd like to squeeze in a question there about the yes movement and how it needs to organise, because it's been rising from each of the contributions you've made, but we haven't got really time to do that justice before the break. So we're going to add it into the big difficulties section which follows. And just before we have the break, we're going to have just a quick shout out for Scottish CND from Lynn Jameson, who's here, because basically Mike is a massive supporter. Whilst in his hospital bed in one ward, he signed up 5 new members for Scottish CND. So please, Lynn.
Okay, thank you. So this will be quick. Just 2 things to tell you. One, we're having an event at Fastlane where the UK's nuclear weapons are this Sunday, which you can find if you want to come with us on a bus. Some of us are going to be dressed as sea creatures because we're doing a die-in. It's going to be a short, dramatic dying event for the visuals, as you say. So if you want to join us, just Google Scottish CND Fastlane on the 26th of September. So I want to know how many of you have heard of the campaign for nuclear disarmament. Can I see a show of hands? Okay, great, quite a lot. How many of you are members of the Scottish campaign for nuclear disarmament? Okay, right, let's change that. There's a good few here, but not nearly as many as have heard of us. So just join us. We need you. An independent Scotland will be a nuclear-free Scotland. The first thing it will do is sign the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Okay? So join us.
Righty, that's one I'll be sorting out immediately after.
Well, yes. Thank you, Lesley, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here. And yes, lovely. We're here. I think this may be the first time that a Conservative politician has been invited to address a gathering such as this, so it is indeed a great honour. To address a gathering of the clan, as it were. The clan, yes, the clan. I feel part of the clan. I don't mean the clan like the sort of pointy hat, sort of not very inclusive sort of clan. It's more the Scottish clan, coming home, you know. Yes, yes, quite so, yes. No offence intended, by the way. So, are there any English people in the room this evening? Yes, oh well. Now don't worry, if you become independent and all goes tits up, we will grant you asylum, so don't worry. Absolutely fine, yes. So, as you may have gathered, I've had time to think about this. I had to go for a bit of Dutch courage, you know, so to speak. Slightly daunting. Doesn't say much about the Dutch, does it? If it is for courage, I suppose they could kick you to death with their wooden shoes or bore you to death with their rather bland cheeses, as it were, yes. But in all seriousness, it's a delight to be here, and I'm sure we'll be in for some lively discussion as the evening progresses. Certainly, it seems to be a much more interesting gathering than my visit to the Scotland office this afternoon. It's a vast sea of carpets with the outlines where the desks used to be. It's very depressing. Looks like it's haunted. It does, yes. And some of you may be aware that I have a new book coming out next month titled Towards an Independent Union, which and I'm going to be discussing some of the ideas, putting forward a bit of a manifesto based on some of the ideas in my book. I'm a keen student of constitutional affairs. Yes, so the book will be available from your local Waterstones, probably not from the Yes Hub, so you may have to go into town to get it. So, I want to start just by putting something out there. Just let me put this out there. I am in touch with you. I am happy to touch you. I really am. I'm a big fan of Scotland and all things that are intrinsically Scottish. And I've been immersed in Scottish culture since my childhood holidays up here north of the border, you know. And, you know, while we're talking about Scottish culture, I have to say I have to thank the proprietor of the local kilt shop who assured me that this rig out was pretty much de rigueur for this sort of do. Apparently it's known as the Fairbairn. Very nice, yes. Big fan, by the way, big fan. Anyway, this Scottishness, if you'll allow me to call it that, seeped into my bones from an early age. I feel Scottish the minute I cross the border. Those fundamentally Scottish pastimes that you all enjoy, like grouse shooting and country house parties and taking the piss out of your unintelligible accents. Yes, you can't be immersed in that for a fortnight every couple of years and not come out feeling like a true blue Scotchman. Yes. So, we'll have a chance tonight to thrash out some interesting ideas, and I hope I can contribute to that debate, the debate that is going to be our constitutional future. Yes. So, 2014 was referendum year. Now, I hesitate to call it referendum year. That makes it sound like it might become a regular occurrence, you know, sort of like a leap year. Yes. And we don't want to entertain the possibility of millions of pounds wasted again for nothing to change. Now, why am I saying that? Because some of you in this room possibly voted no the last time, and you may be feeling rather let down by promises that were made and not kept. And we would like to change all that. So tonight I'm going to lay out a fascinating and radical manifesto for how we might bring the nation back together again. Right. Was that almost applause there? No, I don't think so. Yes. Well, I'm very surprised that we lost the last time round. I'm very surprised indeed. And can I urge you all, if there is a rerun, please do register for a postal vote. It does help a lot. Thank you. Yes. So, well, we need to overcome the feeling that promises have been broken. People feel they were lied to, and that's not good. But the vote went our way. Those of us in the Remain campaign, the vote went our way. But we shouldn't allow that to keep us away from trying to undo some of the damage by those broken promises, you know. Don't let the victory be the end of this. Don't see it that way. I'm deadly serious about this, deadly serious. It's time for us as Conservatives to re-engage the people we've let down, and we have let them down. Indeed, we've let ourselves down and possibly let the school down as well. Yes. So, I hope you're all sort of sticking with me on this. Scotland was once a Tory stronghold, but now we have a smattering of MPs, a small representation in the Scottish Parliament. We have no teeth anymore, so we have got it badly wrong somewhere. We need to find a way to re-engage the hearts and minds of the Scottish people. I say it's time to be bold, to reach out and grab you by the spurtle and the sporran and prove that the Union is something precious, something special and unique. By winning the referendum in 2014, we divided the people. So, I'm going to give you a sneak peek, some of the ideas from my new book, and I think you'll find some of these absolutely fascinating, in fact. Just bear with me 2 minutes while I dig through my notes. Yes. We came up with some rather good ideas. We've been brainstorming this a bit. We propose funding Scottish spending directly, taking the worry away from the Scottish Parliament, and that would plug the gap that was left by EU funding. Money will be immediately allocated to the Scottish cricket team as a priority. Yes. We also propose to raise the drink driving limit in Scotland and higher again for those that live in the country. And I would have to credit that idea to Sir Nicholas himself. He came up with that one quite a time ago. Highland dancing will be taught in London, and Morris dancing will be banned across the UK as a whole. Okay. We also have plans to abolish Wales. Their place names have far too many consonants in them. Yes. No offence intended. Any Welsh people in the room tonight? Well, there you go. Yes. I rest my case. So this radical new approach really hinges on us re-engaging with the old Britain, the Britain that we all loved, when Scotland was a Tory stronghold. There were things that bound us together. We were the country that at its very core had decency and integrity, and we were happy to protect those around the world who were not able to take care of themselves. We were father and mother to a family of nations that flourished and rose up with one voice when forces of darkness threatened our way of life. Think of the First World War. The Scotch and the noble Englishmen, the Irishman and the thieving Welshman were obliterated together, united in a common cause of that noble cause. And alongside the sons of our island stood our brothers in arms from the Empire. They came to fight and die alongside us in the name of what, I can't remember what it's all about. I mean, it's usually about oil these days, but it wasn't that. So it was probably about coal or brioche or defending the Magimix line or something. I don't really remember. But what bound us together were the values of Great Britain, this family of nations, several large graveyards worth of this family of nations. Now, many of us are parents here, and these days we're told to listen to our children, to try to be better parents, to be engaged with our children, but it's also our duty to stop them from harming themselves, and we don't want to see you harming yourselves. The Celtically inclined children of this great nation have been allowed to run riot. Now, you may not like what I'm saying here. It's sad. Most of our children are now lost to us. Some we let fly. They were strong and responsible. You know, the paler shades of the empire seem to have done all right. The rest of them, not so much so. But what does this have to do with us here and now? This re-engagement. People have told me they're frightened. They're frightened of independence. I can well understand that. You might find it insulting or denigrating, but that's what I hear on the doorstep. Yes. They say that Project Fear didn't work. Well, some sensible advice in there. You know, I'm surprised it worked the first time round anyway. You lot have never struck me as being that frightened, you know, you really haven't. Only last night I bumped into some voters in the hotel bar who were keen to engage with me, and the only Project Fear was me beating a hasty retreat up the stairs before they filled me in, I think the expression was. Yes. But I don't get it. Project Fear, I mean, it's fascinating. You're aggressive and assertive, but you seem to hate yourselves almost as much as we... At the end of the day, we're all Jack Sampson's bairns. Our level with you, Project Fear was considered for a sequel, and I want to lay some of these rumours to rest right now. At no time did I suggest that the Queen should die during the next independence referendum. I want to set the record straight on that one right now. Besides, she's as fit as a fiddle. Her mother lived to be 135 or something, and she doesn't drink nearly as much as her old mama did. Probably outlive us all. It was also suggested that we considered the Duke as a candidate for that one, but sadly, he went down with the ship. You've taken so long to get the second independence referendum off the ground that that ship has well and truly sailed, I'm afraid. Yes. Nor was it suggested that we should agitate a bit of Scottish terrorism, you know, blowing up post boxes, that sort of thing, and blame it on Nicola's ginger caliphate. That was never suggested. Besides, no one actually writes to anyone anymore anyway. You know, you're all so busy WhatsApping each other and all that one day you'll pass away. You can't leave your WhatsApps to the Bodleian Library, you know, assuming that you went to Oxford. Anyway, there were some good ideas, however. I suggested, why don't we get the PM and his missus to have another baby during the next independence referendum campaign? Sort of rally the nation around a new young family at number 10, you know? And then someone said, why not take it a step further? Why not get them to adopt a baby? A little mixed-race Scottish baby. That would tick all sorts of boxes. Maybe get one that's even a bit older and has the accent already, you know, all that. That was a very good idea. Meghan Markle could be the godmother. You know? Yeah. Dispatch the Tory cabinet north of the border? No. Face-to-face has never really worked for us here. Douglas Ross? Again, no. So we thought a bit more and someone said, why don't we do something big that really unites the two nations? Some big infrastructure, like maybe something that connects the two countries together, like a road or a railway. And I said, well, I think we've pretty much got that one covered. And then someone else said, why don't we build a bloody great tunnel that comes out in the northeast? I think that's a Tory constituency up there somewhere. Comes out the northeast of Scotland, runs all the way down sort of the right-hand side of the country, and then turns right up the Thames again, right up the Thames, under the Thames, and straight up through a tunnel into the west end of London. Of course, the parking was a problem with that one, so we ruled that one out as well. Yes. So, I would have to add that the tunnel does show a commitment to big infrastructure that benefits the whole nation, like Crossrail. Yes. So we moved on from Project Fear, we've moved on from blatant attempts to court you with interventions from the Queen and Prime Ministerial offspring, stroke weddings, stroke fabulous and great value interior design malarkey at number 10 Downing Street. So it is time to get serious. I'd like to propose something so radical, so forward-looking, so inclusive and unifying that we will only be able to see the country through red, white and blue tinted spectacles. I'm talking about cross-national representation. Now, this is indeed a radical idea. I look out at this hall and I see, no, I feel that here sits a gathering for whom the establishment and the status quo, very unfairly banned from Radio 1, I would have to add, for whom the establishment and the status quo are anathema. So here we are, and here we are, and here we go. Cross-national representation. Now, I would usually explain this using a PowerPoint presentation, but I've left the ministerial laptop on the train. It's just got a good password on it, it's fine. So, I'm going to ask some members of the audience to step up and ask me to demonstrate how this all works. So we need 4 people from the audience. If we've got 4 could come forward, please, and we'll sort of walk you through cross-national representation. Don't be in too much of a hurry. Do we have an English person, perhaps, to come down and represent an English constituency? Well, I'll do that one. How about you, sir? Would you like to come up and join us? No, sir? Madam? No? All right. Oh, God. Well, that's the next 5 minutes of this buggered up, isn't it? Yes. So well, you do it. Lesley's going to do it. Well, let's make you the Scottish MP, okay? Right. And we need someone to come and act as a Welsh MP. Thank you very much. Fantastic. Northern Irish member here. Yes. Wearing a mask, of course. Now, so it's a very simple idea. The idea is that across the length and breadth of the nation, each constituency, of course, already elects 1 MP. So, for example, Lesley here represents a constituency in Edinburgh, and I represent a constituency in the south of England. So, every 6 months, these MPs would change places. So, if you head up there. So Lesley is now representing my constituency, and I'm representing Lesley's constituency. So, the differences no longer matter. Now, then we've got a Sinn Féin MP here, and we have a Plaid Cymru MP, which presents a bit of a problem, actually, for the twinning. So we'll twin the SNP MPs with them, and then, oh no, it doesn't really, I don't really see how that works. So possibly what we need to do is that, if me, the English MP, if I get the Scottish MP and the Irish MP to disagree with each other all the time, and we'll discount the Welsh MP altogether, so that's not important. And that really is the essence of cross-national representation. Yes. Well, thank you so much. I thought you would be interested. Many more radical, and thank you so much to our volunteers. That was it was a less than enlightening demonstration, but it gives you a general sort of idea. Yes. So it only remains for me to say, thank you so much for having me along. I do hope you'll buy a copy of my book when it does come out. So as a parting shot, I will say, good night, North Britain, and a happy St. George's Day when it comes.
Lordy, lordy, the horror, the horror. Anyway, that was, yeah, the Right Honourable Archie Cornwall, aka Andy Paterson, who put his head around trying to think his way into being a Conservative in front of all of you, which is no easy feat. So please, another round of applause. And of course, Andy Paterson, not McLaren. What is happening to me? So, we're about to have part 2 of the debate. So would you please, I mean, it's a bit of a come on up. Let's have that kind of big round of applause thing, like, you know, the Price is Right. And you've got to keep going till they sit down, keep applauding, keep going. They're taking ages, they're politicians, they don't know about this, keep going. Deary Lord Almighty, and it's Robin's last, my God. Right, so we've got everybody back in place. Well, learning from sort of part 1, which was absolutely fascinating, I hope you'll agree. Lots of things said, discussed, dissected, agreed upon, which you just don't hear. What is wrong with our political debate that, you know, we do not hear this sort of debate anywhere? So, learning from that, we managed to get through 2 whole questions on the first half. So, cunningly now, I think to myself, I'm going to clump one question together, which is a kind of multi-faceted hydra of a question, the big difficulty question. And then we're going to definitely get a question in about the shape of the yes movement. We've got to do that. And perhaps logically it comes at the end. I know that I've got a comrade, Eduardo, who is going to, not now, but when we come to that, stand up and give us his tuppence worth because he's got some good things to say. But anyway, let's start off with this multi-headed hydra that we have before us. Because I was trying to sort of look at this. We've obviously got the currency, the border, and the European Union, at least. I mean, I'm sure that, you know, people that have written papers on everything can chuck in another 4 things, but no, they will not. Because we're going to stick to these 3. They're obviously quite related, because the border changes very obviously according slightly to what you do with the European Union. So maybe it makes some sense to put these 3 together. It also means that the panel can pick the things upon which they feel most animated or expert. And if anybody hasn't switched off their mobile phones, I'm going to come and get you next. So, here's the 3 questions. Selma's looking at me like, don't do this, because I'm going to have to write them all down and remember them. Write them down and remember them, Selma, come on. They're pretty obviously, these questions, but they came in. The first from Ruth Ritchie, from Yes Annandale and Yes Lockerbie. Anybody for Sooth here? Anybody? Yay. That's a very neat and compact yay, you know. Right. So, just do that again. That's because you're one person, is that it? Right, okay. Still, there's nobody here from Wick, is there? No, see, so that's better. Right, Ruth Ritchie asks, if you were standing at Gretna 1 year after Independence Day, looking across the River Sark, what would our reinstated international border actually look like? What would you see? So I guess what she's kind of meaning behind that is what level of hard border do we have there after Independence Day? Stuart Wells has asked a question, how can we get some kind of heads of agreement from the European Union stating that Scotland will be invited to be a full member within an agreed number of months or years of gaining independence. So how can we get some kind of heads of agreement from the European Union? That, of course, is assuming that joining the European Union is what you want. So you can disagree with that too. And thirdly, Howard Marston, just to kind of complicate the currency question as if it's not complicated enough, says the Scottish coin, a cryptocurrency, is in use. Could we not use that? Right, that will blow my brain, so I'm thankful I don't have to answer it. But basically, that is a question about currency. What are we going to do? So we've got there the border. What's it going to look like? How hard, not hard? The EU, will we get some sort of agreement ahead of time? Do we want one? And what kind of currency are we going to use? And does anyone understand cryptocurrencies enough to talk about it? So who are we going first with? This time it's Robin.
Okay, look, I'll answer this really quickly because I know some of you have heard me drone on about these quite a lot. When you look at the border, it will have booths with barriers which are open. There'll be cameras, that's it. So the capacity to put in border controls if you have to, in a pandemic or something like that, which won't be open most of the time, it'll be smart borders, which is what they're called internationally. Which means that the cameras take notice of the cars coming in back and forward. Any stops that do have to take place do not take place at the border. They take place further in. And so, for example, if you're doing spot checks on whiskey barrels, you can do that at the distillery. You don't stop people at borders anymore. Nobody does. This is absolutely bog standard. Travel between any two countries in Europe and you will see something like this. I'm assuming that we have a free travel area with the UK, but I would be amazed if we didn't have that. The question about what we do with it then is another one, but that's what it'll look like and that's how it'll work. Let me just jump to currency. I can do quite a bit in cryptocurrency if you want, and almost all the big central banks are now looking at central bank cryptocurrencies, digital currencies, CBDCs. There is a lot of merit in it. There is quite a bit of concern about the surveillance element this gives central banks. If you're using digital currency with central banks, they can follow you everywhere. It's also an issue we should consider about environmentally. So each bit of Bitcoin that is traded produces the equivalent of throwing 2 iPhones in the bin. I know that's surprising, but the computers which do the calculations on Bitcoin are so powerful and they're upgraded so fast because they need to be, that they get thrown out in under a year. There's a massive amount of electronic waste involved in digital currencies. They are not virtual in a meaningful sense. But you can't run, well, you can try, but you shouldn't run an economy on a virtual currency alone. It's a very bad idea. There's all sorts of social justice reasons, but there's all sorts of central control of monetary policy reasons why you don't want to do that anyway. So the possibility of a secondary digital currency from a Scottish central bank, certainly, but as an addition to, not a replacement for. And I won't even bore you with the many, many reasons why we need to move with pace to having a currency. I'm just going to say, any country caught without a currency of its own during the pandemic ended up at the IMF looking for loans. You need your monetary policy to be an independent country. Finally, the EU. And on this one, the question is one that I am now going to be a bit more honest about. We need to start discussing what we mean by EU membership. I am absolutely not against EU membership for an independent Scotland. I am going to emphasise that if you do it fast, the pain is horrendous. So even if we were getting mitigation to EU accession rules, they are still very difficult for a country like Scotland. We are structured like a regional economy, not a national economy. If we join the European Union with a regional economy, we have not built that economy up to be more like a national economy, we will find that we will be stuck and ossified in that situation. We need to think about the progression towards the European Union, how we get there and how we do it. I also warn that the European Union is going to do us no favours. I've so many times heard, oh, but they're more sympathetic to us now. Or you know, they let East Germany in. Yeah, the UK, they might be a bit pissed off of it, but it's not the Soviet Union. This is not massive geopolitics here. When it comes right down to it, Joining the European Union requires bilateral negotiation with every single individual member nation state. And one of those is Spain. And it works by consensus, and we will not get that consensus prior to going through the full processes of joining. So I think we need to be more honest about the progression towards European Union membership, what it is that we need to do when we get there. I think we need to have a debate internally about what pain would be brought with excessively rapid integration, and what threats there would be to the ongoing Scottish economy. We would be ossified as a regional nation inside European Union rules.
Robin, can I just ask you to flesh out the pain a bit? If that isn't too horrible a way of putting it.
Okay.
Because I mean, we have been until kind of like last year full EU citizens, so some people might be thinking, well, how hard is it to get back there?
Well, there's all sorts of things. I won't go into all, but just for example, the obvious one's the budget surplus. I mean, it's brutal, it's 3%. Now, we might get everyone else has got a derogation from that just now because of COVID. We might, but they will not tell us that until we start the accession process. And I've seen the argument that you can delay the action as long as you've got a plan in place, which is to say yes, so you can say we'll have the austerity now or we'll have it next week. On the never, it's still there. But there's all sorts of other things you would want to spend some time boosting the Scottish economy, like every other nation state did prior to entering the European Union. It is way easier to do that if we take a period of time outside state aid, competition and procurement laws. It helps us to build up our economy like all the major economies that are in Europe that used various forms of that kind of protectionism to get them into the place. So, for example, the German National Investment Bank would have been entirely illegal to set up under European Union rules, but it is not illegal to run it under European Union rules. We've got 17 mandatory regulatory agencies that we would need to set up before we even qualify. We have to have had our own currency operating before we begin the initial discussions. And I want to be clear about this. It's not just having your currency. To join the European Union, you must demonstrate that you have all the policy mechanisms in place that you can control your interest rates, which is to say a functioning central bank with a track record. All these things have to be done. And wishing them away is unwise. We can join.
Right.
It's just that we need to be a little more honest about what it means, what the timescales are. I am personally, strongly now, an EFTA, EEA, EU progression model. Take a step when your economy says it's ready for the next step, signal the destination that you want to get, say you want to be Europe, say you want to work closely with them. You're not going to have the dumb hostility that's been generated between Britain and the EU, but be honest about the stages that you've got to reach to get in there in a way that's good for Scotland. It is all doable. We need to have this conversation among ourselves soon to get the details right, so that when we're asked this in public, we know what we're talking about and we're not getting ambushed with questions about how are you going to get 17 regulatory agencies set up. We've got some of them, we don't have all of them.
Right. Okay. Gillian, the same cocktail there, the border, European Union, the currency. And you don't have to be, for everyone, you could just pick one or two if you want to.
I think probably I think two of them are linked, as Robin said about EU and money. I would like to see us with our own currency, our own central bank. It lets us have our own macroeconomic policies, set interest rates, which would let us as a country plan for crisis, which is one of the things that we don't have control over just now, which I think is really important. I think that leads into the whole, I would very much like to see us back in the EU, but I recognise that that's quite a long, it will be a long process for an independent Scotland, I think, because the not so small elephant in the room of Spain and what that would signal to independent parts of Spain that they could do as well, I think is a huge problem. On the border, I'm not an expert on borders, but I think very much I would like to see something that allows addresses the concerns of some of the communities in the borders, whether they are yes or not, that for their livelihoods and for their general lives, some of that cross-border travel is necessary for them to access school, to access health services and things like that. So I think that's something that we have to talk about quite openly. But I'd also like to see more engagement with the general yes movement on this. As political parties, we can often sit and have our own thoughts on these things. We're having citizens' assemblies on climate. We should be doing something, I think, ourselves to have those conversations and to have that general input that sometimes we can sit and have a debate, we can sit and have chats within our own groups and things, but I do think there has to be that higher level conversation of where we want to
But I mean, just as a matter of interest, has there been a debate at the Green Conference about EU versus EFTA membership? I'm pretty much here to tell you there hasn't, actually.
No,
I missed one of your conferences, and that's not the kind of stuff that tends to get dissected. And I don't know, has the Scottish Parliament discussed this in any way? I mean, it would be over, that would be presumably considered beyond your pay scale?
I don't think I haven't seen it considered at Holyrood, certainly. As a party, it's maybe not come to conference, but I have absolutely no doubt that branches will have discussed it, and there will have been those conversations had other places, because the discussion at conference is quite often not quite as reflective of what the more in-depth discussions that go on at branch level and within interested parties.
Okay, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, it pains me to say it, but I completely agree with Robin on the currency issue. The idea of sterlingisation and the Growth Commission's position is completely untenable, and we need our own currency, and we should have been doing work on this years ago. If devolution was an expression that we exist, and we thought that the problem we were trying to solve was that we needed our own parliament, the independence movement poses a different question, that what we really need is our own democracy. And the issue of the border, I never really fully understood this. People get very exercised about the border. Of course we should have a border. Of course any independent country should have a border that you can control. And if the pandemic has told us anything, it's that we need to be able to control our own landmass, our own sovereignty, and our own border. Can you imagine? We can look to countries like New Zealand, who, with the island status, has this much easier. But can you imagine if we were able to close the border at different times without the political and media hysteria that evoked? So I think that the border is a very straightforward case. We need to be able to control our own border because we will be an independent country, and this goes without saying.
And I'm just curious, have you a view on the European Union, EFTA? Do you want to be in? Do you not?
I want to be in Europe. I think people voted overwhelmingly to be in the European Union. I understand the criticisms of Europe and its limitations. I would want to be in, but with another referendum to ratify that. I think we are a European nation, and we will be again.
Okay, Selma?
Okay, you told me to write them down, and because I was a good girl guide, I wrote them all down. But see everything that Robin said? I had one word written down, and that was preparation. Because that is what is missing in the whole of this debate, the preparation. I can't come at this as a politician or even as a party member. I don't go to branch meetings because I don't belong to any political party. I can only tell you what we hear on the doorstep with Edinburgh Women for Independence. So the notion of a currency, I still get, I belong to a women's walking group, I still get women in that walking group who say, quite obviously my age range, couldn't possibly have independence, my pension will go. Couldn't possibly have independence because we don't have our own money, Selma. Okay, I asked them, where do you think the Bank of England gets their money from? I swear to God, one of them turned around and said, oh, they print it. Okay, they print their money. Why can't we print our money? Oh, we don't have any banks anymore. So where is the preparation to have that type of question and answer and debate ready in detail so that when the Yes movement is out there talking, we have that information ready? I don't know whoever asked the question about the cryptocurrency. I don't know if that was the chap that stopped us in Portobello, because we had our Root in a Boot stall in Portobello about 2.5 weeks ago, and that's exactly what that guy came up and spoke to us about. All he wanted, all he believed that would solve our problems was a cryptocurrency. So we said, as a backup, as a reserve, but if you cannot convince people that their pounds, shillings and pence, which then becomes a Scottish currency, is going to be secure, how are you going to convince them that a cryptocurrency is going to be secure? The majority of us don't use it, don't understand it, wouldn't want to touch it with a barge pole if we thought we understood it. So don't go about saying that that's going to solve all our problems, and that has to be our first priority, because it can't be. Right. EU membership, the question isn't going to be, do you want independence and go into the Union, the European Union? The question's not going to be, do you want independence and keep the monarchy? Those are preparations that we have to go through prior to giving the answer, do we want independence, should we be an independent nation? So unless we prepare for that, can you imagine the type of literature that we will see about borders? They're going to produce glossy pictures that show drop-down gates whereby you've got all the lorries not getting in with our food that we need because we've put up a border, and then they're going to have all the cars the other side trying to leave Scotland because we're too wee, too poor and too stupid to run our country. So we've got to get that preparation in place. Obviously, it's not going to be gates. It's going to be, you're going to have the electronic tagging on cars and vehicles. You're going to be checking things away from the borders. But you've got to have that in preparation.
Right. Good.
That's it.
Sorry, it's just the old time going on, but that was excellent, Selma. And obviously, just a top tip here, you know, if you're back on the kind of streets of Stockbridge and you're on that cryptocurrency thing, just don't talk to Selma about it. Right, Colin, next on the 3 big difficulties.
The 3 big difficulties. Can you actually see the River Sark from Gretna? I've never been. The first thing I'd say to this question is, it's very clever of you to pick up the issue of the border, because it's obvious that this, in any second referendum that takes place, the Unionists are going to make this a big issue because they think people are frightened of the change and the kind of thing that we're seeing today in Northern Ireland between the North and the South. And I think what I would like to see, I'd like to see an independent Scotland with the same border arrangements as we have just now, tracking straight and forward with our biggest partner, which will remain England after our independence, with family ties respected, and with England and Scotland continuing to work together the way they do just now. That's surely what we want to see with an independent Scotland, that kind of relationship with the next nearest neighbour that we have. On the EU, I have to say, listen to the panellists, 2016 is a long time ago, isn't it? On the referendum day, I was in Madrid. Not on my holidays, I was helping Podemos and the elections to the Spanish Parliament that took place the Sunday afterwards. And on referendum day, 2016, I was in Madrid, 10 o'clock at night. They were asking me, I was in the bar, which I do occasionally, and they said, Colin, tell us, how do you think the result's going to go back there in Scotland and Britain? And I said, well, I think it's going to be close, but there's going to be a Remain majority. Dong, 10 o'clock, the exit polls, Remain by a slight majority, and they're buying me drink all night. I wake up on the Friday morning with a hangover like you probably had yourself. Turn on the Sky News, dong, completely wrong. But when I go back to Edinburgh on the Monday, the Yes Hub has got a giant EU flag in the window where the saltire used to be. And I have to say, I voted to Remain as the lesser of 2 evils. The European Union is no friend of Scotland, it's no friend of the Scottish people. But because the choice was that the Leave side were led by charlatans like Farage and people who want to blame foreigners for our problems, I would have nothing about. My advice to my friends and colleagues in the independence movement is, let this issue go. Leave it alone. The vote took place. It was agreed democratically. Let it go. We don't need to join the EU. If we decide to join the EU, then it should be a referendum we decide after we're independent and not before. That's my attitude towards the EU, and I think that's the way we'll go forward, quite frankly, because this issue is lessening and lessening and lessening. Britain left the EU 18 months ago, and that issue is diminishing as far as I'm concerned. And that's my answer to that question on the EU. And on currency, I have to say, I'm going to let you into a secret here. I can't see anybody, so I'll just presume there's nobody here. But see, on the Yes Scotland Advisory Board that Michelle and I sat on, there was a famous meeting one month in 2014 where we decided by a majority at that meeting that Scotland should have its own currency, and that should be the position that the independence movement Yes Scotland had. And I remember Blair Jenkins uncomfortable about it, and Nicola was there and others, and it was decided to leave that decision standing for a month to see whether our fears about the polls and the opinion polls about where we stood in a currency, to see if it changed the next month. We were assured by the SNP at the time that there was internal polling was going to show that the idea that we kept the pound was going to be more popular instead of being an Achilles heel. And I have to say, it's my one single regret on the Yes Scotland Advisory Board for 2 years. That was the occasion for the majority, myself, Michelle, Patrick Harvey, Pat Kane, Elaine C. Smith, Dennis Canavan, we should have dissented, we should have insisted, and we should have stuck to our guns and said the answer here is we have to have our own currency for monetary and fiscal reasons. We have to have our own currency because that's what taking back control is all about. And if you don't have your own currency, you're not truly independent in a world dominated by corporate finance capitalism.
Lordy, I didn't actually engineer it this way.
Don't
I know
repeat that.
it is a secret, and you've obviously got it off your chest after nursing it like wrath for 4 years. But anyway, Michelle, do you recognise that account of the meeting, for starters?
Well, I wasn't ever on the advisory board, Colin. I think you may be mistaking me for somebody else. Definitely.
That's what they all say.
No, Colin. I definitely wasn't, and I wasn't aware of that. So let's deal with the matters in hand. One question that nobody's asked, because there's been some very good contributions from across the panel, which I'll reflect on, is seeing the issue of borders. What do we think the English people would like to see? Because we've got used to being sold this narrative that, oh, we'll shut everything and make it impossible for you. And I am at heart an optimist. I genuinely believe that our friends and neighbours south of this country won't want to shut their borders. They will, of course, want to continue to trade with us. And it's just one of these big fear stories. Yes, there will be a border. I agree with Robin about a smart border. And let's not forget that most of our trade with the rest of the UK is in services rather than products. So, you know, what we imagine of the old-fashioned idea of a border is just a lot of stuff and nonsense. In terms of the currency, I think I might be unpopular here, but my view around having a transition period and the points about preparation, I would refer to as a transition period. We have to be very careful at that point of independence that there isn't capital flight, because we have to acknowledge that there is some uncertainty. So I do believe that at the immediate point of independence, we should continue to use the pound for the critical reason, hear me out, the critical reason that most of us here have pensions and most of us here have mortgages and they are long-term contracts, and that is complex to be worked out, and it must be worked out. But the reason I said hear me out is the other thing we've not touched on tonight is dual currencies. There are multiple countries around the world that use multiple currencies, not even just dual currencies. So my view is that we will need to carry on using the pound. Yes, sterlingization, but introduce our own currency as quickly as we can. And one thing I would say, absolutely not on day one of independence. We'll make ourselves a hostage to fortune economically. Absolutely, absolutely. Whether we like it or not, we have a duty of care to protect ourselves on the advent of independence. And I suppose my point about transition, I agree there's a huge amount of work to be done about how we get to this. And I think it's fair to say my view of the white paper at the time tried to, and I'm sure did it for the best of reasons, to say, look, put people's minds at rest. And of course, what we've got now is a population who are highly articulate and intelligent and have their own views about this. And so I think this kind of honesty in these conversations is very much to be welcomed. Definitely no to cryptocurrency because of the risks involved that are considerable. The last point in terms of the EU, my personal view is that we should seek to rejoin the EU. Not only is it a massive trading bloc and we are seeing the significant issues, I agree very strongly with the point that Mike made earlier, supply chains are collapsing all over the place. This is really, really going to hurt. Also culturally, around the EU, we don't talk about that very much. We hear a lot of talk about business, but the cultural element of it I regard as very important. I regard myself as European. But I agree with Robin. I think we have to be honest about the complexity and the processes that we need to go through. It is complex. I don't think it's realistic for the EU to sign up to heads of terms, if you like. Well, they will want to hedge. This is the nasty, dirty business of politics, and therefore it's incumbent upon us to continue to persuade people that taking the steps forward to make our own future, to create our own future, can only be better than the determined, evident decline of the EU, of the UK rather, as expressed by the Tories. That's what we're looking at.
Right. Well, look, thank you for that. I'm vexed that you weren't the women in the room, because that's a fascinating tale from Colin, which, you know, adds a certain sort of critique to what many of us were quite surprised to hear from Alex Salmon back in the day, you know. Anyway, so let's move on to the other big question I did want to tackle, which is the question about leadership. And now, Eduardo, are you still there, Eduardo? Right, okay. Have you got your mask off just for this bit? Right, just tell me now what you told me a wee minute ago. And boom it out there. You can see why I said, would you just say that all again in the middle of this next question? Because this question really is, what kind of yes campaign will there be? And what kind of yes campaign should there be, given that the SNP seems pretty determined to run a campaign on its own? And I suppose implied in that too, a campaign for what? Since at least some of the panel don't think there's going to be an independence referendum anytime soon. So really, what should the yes movement be doing now? and how should it organise itself? So that's what I'm asking. I'm trying to think now who has not gone first already, and that is Selma.
Okay, what should the Yes movement be doing? Oh, well, first of all, I go back to the notion of it's an amalgamation. It's a movement, and a movement has to progress, and it has to take on new ideas and new people all the time. And therefore, that makes us totally distinct from politicians. I'll be honest with you, I don't believe any politician should lead a movement. Let them lead their parties, let them have their ideologies, let them have their manifestos. But a movement comes from the people and stays and is owned by the people. Now, at the weekend past, we saw Believe in Scotland do something that we haven't done for how very long, and that was a day of action across Scotland. Now, with or without that, let's be totally honest, I can't speak for any other organisation, and I'm not really speaking for Edinburgh Women for Independence at this stage, but we are exhausted. We have been going on from 2014 to the moment, and we need to see a determination from the politicians to move the politics forward. If we don't get what we've just been talking about, the preparation, the ideas, what are we saying to people out on the stalls? What are we saying to people when we're out there? We're waving flags? Okay, that is hearts. We're waving our banners. Okay, that is hearts, but you've also got to get the minds with the actual hard facts. You've got to be able to give that as well as the hearts. You want the hearts, that's fine. You want the minds, we've got to be prepared. And we've got to have the pockets. Because if the economy is not working, if the economy is going down, then we all become dissatisfied. We have got to show where we can be different. I don't want to say we can be better, but we can be different from that which is befalling the rest of the United Kingdom, because we are ourselves.
But Selma, the question is very much about the Yes movement. I mean, it's disparate. It has, I could stand here for quite a long time listing the various organisations. Any thoughts about how the Yes movement should organise itself? Should there be one Yes movement?
That is so difficult. I mean, the last time we were together was on the SIC panel. I think it was the same when I was with Robin. That was the last time. And where are they now? And where, let me be very honest, I'll ask the question, where is the Women for Independence movement? We're all doing our own thing, and that is the big problem. I do not advocate one particular leader, but I'm genuinely now asking the question, because of the success, okay, there hasn't been much time to analyse it all, but because of the success that we think that we've had over the last weekend, is BIS going to morph into the new umbrella leadership? And is that what is required? I don't know, and that's being totally honest with you. But unless we actually start coming together with some cohesion, we have got a big problem, because it's so much easier to pick off components than it is to pick off a whole movement.
Okay, right, thank you. If anyone missed the acronym, BIS is Believe in Scotland, which was obviously one of the parties organising the Day of Action. Right, Mike.
It's okay. Yeah, I mean, I slightly disagree. I think that the Yes movement has never been more united. I think that we are a united movement ready to move forward, who've been put in abeyance through COVID. But I think I've got some specific thoughts about what that movement should look like. First of all, the climate crisis that we are faced with is an existential crisis for the world. It dominates everything. We cannot think of or conceive of a new democracy without thinking about it in terms of the climate crisis. That's just a reality. So the new Yes movement will be different from the 2014 movement because it'll be facing hard up the code red crisis that the IPCC has presented us with. That must mean that there cannot be a Campbell oil field, and we need to completely reconfigure our economy and our ecology. Secondly, I think that the new Yes movement will be about pandemic recovery and recreating our economy in the sense of the aftermath of the pandemic. Those are two significantly major things that simply weren't there in 2014. I think the best things from 2014 that we need to retain are that we had multiple points of leadership, and we had leadership from below. So we do not want one single yes movement. We need to have self-organized projects, and we need to give priority to young people and new voices, because young people have been abused over the past 10 years by the climate crisis, by Brexit, by education, and by the British state. The other thing I think that we need to mirror from 2014 is that we need to have mass public participation. The best thing about 2014 was events like this, where we recreated town hall and public meetings in the real world and moved beyond mediated space and social media. That is really important to recreate. And finally, the last thing I would say is that we need to speak to society and the wider electorate and not to ourselves.
Okay. Right, Colin. Colin?
Sorry, beg your pardon. First of
And
all,
sorry, we're really struggling on the time now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, because it's fascinating. I'd very much be interested in this question of what you think the actual movement in structural terms should be.
yeah, I'd say I thought Eduardo spoke on behalf of a great many people in the independence movement. I'm sure there'll be tens of thousands of people on Saturday marching through Edinburgh in the march who share that point of view about wondering where is the independence movement going. And to cut to the chase about the honesty that I think is needed here. Look, the independence movement is united, but there are genuine differences between us, and we need to maturely reflect on that. I meet regularly, I'm sure it's not a secret, I meet regularly with the leaders of the other representatives, parties and organisations that are in the independence movement. And I see with my eyes, I've watched the last 5 general elections in Scotland where the SNP won them, and to their credit, and they deserve the spoils. They never made the case for independence once. I came from the Labour Party. I was a Labour Party young socialist 40 years ago. And the Labour Party abstractly are in favour of socialism, but they never make the case for it. And this Sunday, Lesley, the SPD in Germany are standing for election, as you know, maybe win this election. But the SPD in 1900, the German Social Democrats, in effect the German Labour Party, decided to dump their commitment to socialism in return for seats in a parliament. In other words, they choose between electoralism and socialism. And I have to be fearful with you and be honest with you. I think the SNP have done the same thing.
So
they're more interested in winning seats than advancing the case they're supposed to believe with. And I have to say, Lesley, that conflict in this...
So what's the movement going to do with it?
I'm coming to you because you're asking me about a movement and what kind of movement should be. The movement is based on ideas. You can have any movement you like. Without the idea of you knowing where you're going, you're not going to have a movement. So the conflicts that we have got to be talked out. So centrally, the SNP leadership say to me, Colin, the middle class in Scotland are frightened of independence. We therefore need to placate them. And the message is, it means very little change. We keep the pound, we keep the Queen, we keep NATO, we keep the EU, we keep corporate capital in control. And that does not encourage the working class communities that I move in, who want to see independence about change, profound change, an end to fuel poverty, an end to child poverty, and an end to the very real concerns that are their day-to-day reality. And you can't face 2 ways at once. We have to decide what way we go. You have to decide. Our movement has to decide. And that's the reason for the stasis. We're not deciding. We're not deciding the direction we have to go in, and that's why we're not going forward. Solve that problem, and the movement follows. The organisation of it follows. And I have to say, I disagree with Selma and those other contributions. Respectfully, you need a professional dedicated, skilled leadership. It has to know what we're taking on. We're taking on the British state. They're absolutely ruthless in their determination. We have to be the same.
Colin, I have no problem with a professional. All I'm saying is that it shouldn't be a politician from a political party.
Well, that's
Right.
where the professionals
Okay,
are,
so
Selma.
we've agreed on that. But Michelle.
Right, thank you. One of the things I loved about the Yes movement before was that, I mean, I think it would be conceded across the board that people were waiting and waiting for some guidance from the kind of Yes advisory board, and that's not a pop at you, Colin. They were waiting for guidance and a framework, if you like, and whilst they were waiting for that point, they basically said, well, you know what, we're just going to go and do it ourselves. And so reflecting on what Mike said, this amazing flowering of ideas and exchange, if you like. And that actually, in my opinion, was what moved some people from maybe's aye, maybe's no, to no, I definitely want to do this, because I used the analogy at the time. It was like you said to your kids, I've hidden your Christmas presents in that cupboard, but you're not allowed to look. So even if they sneaked a wee peek, and then they shut the door again, that imprint of what could be possible was imprinted on their retina. And that changed a lot of people, because that was the germ of a seed that grew. So I'm not against, and I think it's very healthy for the Yes movement that we have all these different ideas. And I said that at the start of this evening. It's okay to disagree. We all have our own ideas. I can sense your frustration about, but what specifically should be the structure? I can see that there could be some kind of structural board, as long as we recognise that it doesn't then all be like a wee boys' football team where the ball's there and everybody runs after the ball and then the ball moves there. We have to have sufficient freedom for these ideas to be discussed. And finishing off on the last point, at the moment, I don't agree that everybody thinks this and everybody thinks that. Yeah, I reflected earlier, there's a lot more maturity in the discussions we're having, and I'm happy to take some flack about currency or whatsoever, because that's part of the discussion. We need to allow that to continue and let the people prevail, because that's what's starting to happen. So we've genuinely got a bit to go yet.
Right, sadly, we don't have much to go on this, on this debate. So Robin, it's a cruel thing to ask both Robin and Gillian to be very brief. It might be an impossible thing in one person's case, but Robin.
It's the most difficult question in my life, without any shadow of a doubt. I can only speak personally now. The most wonderful thing that happened to me in the last decade, other than my children, was the independence movement. No question about that. The most horrible things that have happened to me since are the independence movement. It has been really, really difficult. I spent the first part of 2015 with my firm belief that we had to move forward through respectful pluralism, and I cajoled and badgered people to say we need a forum where we can sit round and look each other in the eye and behave like grown-ups to each other. And I pushed and pushed to reform the Scottish Independence Convention, and it was attacked, and it was smeared, and it was suppressed, and terrible things were said about it, and we prevailed, and we kept going, and everybody tried to do things, and they didn't amount to the sum of all their parts, and people became exhausted. And I don't have any answers anymore. If the movement as a whole wants to be a movement as a whole, then we all, and that's not with exceptions, we all have to sit around a table and look each other in the eye. We can't decide before we walk in the room who's the dominant partner, who's to do as they're told, who's not going to tell us things, who's not. It's not working. It's not working. So I can only really offer you this. Two things. First of all, in pure practical terms, if we're going to have something that's a movement, there needs to be some core of consent. There has to be something that everybody, give or take, can offer some consent for. And I'll just tell you this, it's no the fucking Growth Commission. There needs to be something. There needs to be something that doesn't treat large parts of the movement with contempt. And of course it'll involve compromise. And of course it means none of us get exactly what we want. But it can't just be dropped on us and told, agree, or you are the enemy. And that's how I feel. Agree or you're the enemy. And that's no good. And I'll be really honest with you. I get phone calls from activists and they really say I'm despondent and I'm down. I don't recognise the most united we've ever been at all. And they say I don't know what to do. And I've come round to saying, listen, enjoy your life. You'll know when there's something to do again, but I don't see it right now. I don't know what to do. But because I can't be leaving you all miserable, because I'm feeling it.
Oh, go on, Robin, you can.
I can't leave you all miserable. I'm going to tell you one thing from, years of my activism and years of studying activism, which is, you have no idea how often it feels like this just before a breakthrough. So if you look throughout history, everything's obvious after it happens. And the example that I keep giving is, Rosa Parks didn't sit in the white man's seat because it was going well in the civil rights movement. She sat in the white man's seat because it wasn't going well, because it had stalled and because things weren't moving. And it was an act of frustration. And afterwards, it's easy to look back and say, there it was. That was the moment when it changed. That was the break point. But that's looking back from history. I am not despairing of the result of them coming back together. We will come back together. We do agree in more than we are divided by. But we have to be given the space and permission as a movement to move together. And I can only say this, the difference between leading and wanting to be followed is so big. Leading involves giving. And this is where I come to in the end of this. Until we have leadership that wants to listen and give, I don't know how we achieve the respectful pluralism that I believe in, and the respectful pluralism that I think is our only damn chance of winning this most essential battle that we've got ahead of us.
Gillian, last word, the movement.
So I think one of the absolute beauties of the movement is how broad it is and how diverse it is, and the differences of opinions, and the fact that there is a debate about what we want Scotland to be, and that there has to be a compromise, because compromise sometimes brings out the best of everybody's thoughts and the best of everybody's aspects. I agree that this has to be led from the grassroots. We're not going to convince people with me or with any other politician standing up and saying, this is what you want, this is what we have to go towards. It's by people like all of you convincing people like all of you that this is a Scotland that we want, and a Scotland we can make. And it comes back to that taking people with us, and that is a grassroots movement through and through. So I know people are tired. I absolutely understand that and respect that tiredness and the frustration with where we're at. But the one thing that I don't think can be taken away from the whole movement is that nobody knows how powerful that they can be within that movement, and how much power can come from, as Robin said, small decisions that we may look back on and say that was the point. But for everybody can be the change that we need to see. Everybody can take forward that change, and I think that's maybe sounds a bit twee, but I think that's maybe the renewed hope that we need to go forward with, and the renewed energy from somewhere. I get we're tired. The renewed energy that we need to find from somewhere to keep going and know that we're right, and that this is the right outcome for Scotland, and this is the outcome that we will get for Scotland.
Great. Right, well, that has been a stoter, actually, and that's all because of you. I mean, I keep thinking to myself, if you just had all of this lot actually in Parliament, then I think, no, don't put them there. Get this get this lot together in a kind of, I don't know, something, you know? Anyway, maybe we'll just talk about that later. But anyway, later comes after our final moment of the night, which is some music to stir the blood before we depart. So I'm going to thank the panel enormously, and they can then go to their seats and watch the music, which would be a bit of a relief for them. Would you please thank everybody on the panel? And now I'm just going to talk, we're just going to welcome onto the stage our two final performers. Tarquin is seamlessly managing to get the microphones back in place for them. So what will I say? In fact, let me just give some of the thanks from everybody else while they're doing that. Thanks to Kevin at Indie Live. Thanks to Paul and the Edinburgh Yes Hub team. Thanks to my Norwegian friends. Thanks to Lynn and Scottish CND. Above all to Mike Blackshaw, the Queen's Hall team, yourself for coming, and of course the panel, our actors and our musicians. When you're leaving, there will be buckets thrown your way, even those folk who don't like music and left early or have to go somewhere very far. So if you've got some coins, honestly, it really adds up. And the Edinburgh Yes Hub did stick the necks out to just book this in the hopes that we would have a good night. So if you have got some spare cash, chuck it in and everybody will be pleased. Right, having blethered enough, we now have our men in position. Would you please welcome Andrew Gordon and Euan Johnston.
As I got out one morning fair to view the meadows round, well then I met a pretty girl come tripping o'er the ground. Sing blow you winds in the morning, blow you winds high-ho, clear away the running gear and blow boys blow. My father has a milkway steed, he keeps it in its stall. It when he eat its hay or corn it when he go at all. Sing blow you winds in the morning, blow you winds high-ho, clear away the running gear and blow boys blow. I told my tale unto the maid, she laughed into my face. So I took her up to the horse's stall and I put her in the horse's place. Sing blow you winds in the morning, blow you winds high-ho, clear away the running gear and blow boys blow. She says this is a novel thing to treat a maiden so. Take up the reins and halt her and you see where you will go. Sing blow you winds in the morning, blow you winds high-ho, clear away the running gear and blow boys blow. She dressed up in her Sunday best to meet me at the church, but my lugger sailed the night before and I left her in the lurch. Sing blow you winds in the morning, blow you winds high-ho, clear away the running gear and blow boys blow. To my father's farm I can't go back for fear she might be there, for the marriage game is not for me, to that I roundly swear. Sing blow you winds in the morning, blow you winds high-ho, clear away the running gear and blow boys blow. Said blow you winds in the morning, blow you winds high-ho, clear away the running gear and blow boys blow. Blow boys blow, blow boys blow, blow boys blow.
Thank you.
Thank you, cheers.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
False, false, say you be to me, my love. Often you've changed your mind, and now you've laid your love at some other fair one. Fear you're no more mine. And I had climbed a tree, was too tall for me, seeking fruit while there wasn't any growing. I've drawn warm water from beneath calm clay, against the stream I was toiling. False, false, say you be to me, my love. Often you've changed your mind, and now you've laid your love and some other fair one. I fear you're no more mine. And I will gang and climb a far taller tree. I'll head in a white snowflake's nest, and down I will fall without any fear to the arms that love me the best. False, false, say you been to me, my love. Often you've changed your mind, and now you've laid your love in some other fair one. I fear you're no more mine. I climbed a tree, was too tall for me, seeking fruit where there wasn't any growing. I've drawn warm water from beneath cold clay, against the stream I was toiling. False, false, hey you been to me, my love. Often you've changed your mind, and now you've laid your love in some other fair one. I fear you're no more mine. False, false, hey you been to me, my love. Often you've changed your mind, and now you've laid your love in some other fair one. I fear you're no more mine. 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 Thank you.
Thanks very much.
A song now that's... oh, sorry.
No, you go, you go, you go.
No. We're hurrying through these, you might tell, because I just had a call. My daughter has swallowed a bottle of invisible ink, so I've got to go up to the Royal. She's up there waiting to be seen at the moment. Hey.
God.
This is a song called Hush Hush. This is for Mike.
This is pretty much the only reason we get booked.
Yeah, he loves this song, so we're going to do it for him.
Hush, hush, time to be sleeping. Hush, hush, dreams come creeping. Dreams of peace and of freedom. So smile in your sleep, Bonnie Bairnie. Once our valleys were ringing with sounds of her children singing, but now she bleat in the evening, and sheilings lie empty and broken. Hush, hush, time to be sleeping. Hush, hush, dreams come creeping. Dreams of peace and of freedom. So smile in your sleep, Bonnie Bairnie. Where was our fierce Highland metal, our men? Once so fearless in battle, our cowed, now huddled like cattle, and wait to be shipped o'er the ocean. Hush, hush, time to be sleeping. Hush, hush, dreams come creeping. Dreams of peace and of freedom. So smile in your sleep, Bonnie Bairnie. We stood with heads bowed in prayer while the factors laid their cottages bare. The smoke fired the cold mountain air, and many lay dead in the morning. Hush, hush, time to be sleeping. Hush, hush, dreams come creeping. Dreams of peace and of freedom. So smile in your sleep, Bonnie Bairnie.
gunda, and tacha sound rookuk me, he me gunda, and tacha sound hoguk me, he me a gestach, rishachana na higis me, he me a duchakum he. He me na morviana, he me na corviana, he me na corichen, he me na scoran fochja.
Hush, hush, time to be sleeping, hush, hush, dreams come creeping, dreams of peace and of freedom, so smile in your sleep, Bonnie Bernie. So smile in your sleep, Bonnie Bernie. So smile in your sleep, Bonnie Bernie.
Thank you. That was a song kind of about immigration. We've kind of got one about immigration now. This one is for all of you that are immigrants yourselves, or you're the sons and daughters of immigrants, or the grandchildren of immigrants. This is called Thousands Are Sailing. Good luck to those people. Oh, you brave Irish heroes, wherever you be, and I pray stand a moment, aye, and listen to me, your sons and your daughters, oh, they're now going away, and thousands are sailing to America. Good luck to those people, safe may they land. They're leaving their country for a far distant strand, leaving old Ireland, no longer can stay. And thousands are sailing to America. And the night before leaving, and you'll hear the last cry, and it's early next morning, oh, their heart gives a sigh, the tears from their eyes, they fall down like the rain, and the horses are prancing, going down to the train. Good luck to those people, safe may they land. And they're leaving their country for a far distant strand, leaving old Ireland, no longer can stay. And thousands are sailing to America. I pity the mother who rears up the child, and likewise the father, they labour and toil to try and support them. They'll work night and day, and when they're reared up, oh, they will go away. Good luck to those people, safe may they land. And they're leaving their country for a far distant strand, leaving old Ireland, no longer can stay. And thousands are sailing to America. Good luck to those people, safely they land, and they're leaving their country for a far distant strand. Leaving old Ireland no longer can stay, and thousands are sailing to America, and thousands are sailing to America.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we've just got one more song for you now.
We've just got back from Germany, actually, and this is a song about Germany. In the 1930s, when the Nazis were rising to power, there was gangs of like street punks at the time, and they grew their hair long, and they listened to jazz, and they just wouldn't take it. You know what I mean? They wouldn't take the rise of fascism. They wouldn't take authoritarianism. And they called themselves the Edelweiss Piraten, and their gangs were called things like the Navajos and the Pirates. So the song's called Navajos and Pirates, and this is a warning from history thing, isn't it?
Indeed it is.
Do you know what I mean? Authoritarianism is never good. Let people speak. Let people act.
As the lights of freedom are one by one put out, resolute, courageous, you never had a doubt. The harder that they pushed you, the harder that you fought. To never bow the knee was the lesson that they taught. Here's to the Navajo who never rode the plain. Here's to the pirates who never sailed the main. Oberhaus and Düsseldorf, Essen and Cologne, the flower that you bore them will ever be your own. Bullied and beaten, your heads were shaven bare, taken to the labour camp until waited there. Criminals, they called you, feckless parasites. They never could recruit you to the war they sought to fight. Here's to the Navajo who never rode the plane. Here's to the pirates who never sailed the main. Oberhaus and Düsseldorf, Essen and Cologne, the power that you bore them will never be your own. Bullied and beaten, your heads were shaven bare, taken to the labour camp until waited there. Criminals, they called you, feckless parasites. They never could recruit you to the war they sought to fight. Here's to the Navajo who never rode the plane. Here's to the pirates who never sailed the main. Oberhaus and Düsseldorf, Essen and Cologne, the flower that you bore them will never be your own. They couldn't understand why you scorned the life they gave, rejecting the banality of the order that they craved. They couldn't stand for difference, all must now obey. The Edelweiss Piraten, they battled every day. Here's to the Navajo who never rode the plane. Here's to the pirates who never sailed the main. Oberhaus and Düsseldorf, Essen and Cologne, the power that you bore them will never be your own. Here's to the Navajo who never rode the plane. Here's to the pirates who never sailed the main. Oberhaus and Düsseldorf, Essen and Cologne, the power that you bore them will never be your own. Thank you very much. Good night.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Yes.
Well, Eduardo, if you're still here, was there enough heart in that for you? Yeah, it was loads of heart. Thank you so much, guys, and I hope your daughter's better. I mean, how much damage can ink do? Right. Anyway, another hand of applause for these great guys.